Hey, it's Nick, and welcome back to But We're Different. This is episode 1 of the Expert Series, the one-on-one dialogue conversations with an impact expert. Today, I chat with sales and marketing coach Will Schultz about an insight he gained helping a B2B SaaS company analyze their close-loss deals and increase its close rate. You can check out the show notes if you want to read the full article on this topic. And now, on to the show. What's up, Will?
What is up, Nick?
Dude, we got something cool going on today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, so let's set the premise real quick because I think this is interesting. The basis of this show is that we work with a lot of clients, and like you specifically work with a bunch of different clients, and there's a whole bunch of insights that we collect because we work with so many clients all at the same time. And we can collect them faster than if you're just working on your own stuff every day. If you're just working in your own company, it's a lot harder to gain these insights. And so you recently discovered something interesting that I think is worth diving deeper into. And that is specifically about close-loss deals, what we can learn from our close-loss deals. And I think a lot of people doing a close-loss analysis isn't the most novel thing in the world, but I think the things that you've discovered working with clients and some of the things that you've been doing with them to help address this or utilize this data point has been super interesting. So I think it's worth going into a little bit today. So help set the premise or set the stage for what this is all about.
Yeah, let's talk about where this came from first. So I was working with a B2B benefits company that had a close rate from people reaching out to them that was 25% or less. And they thought they were doing good close loss analysis. They worked in HubSpot, and they would check the records and go through conversations with their sales team and basically audit why these things weren't being won. And they said, we want to make this a little more processized in our business. What does that look like? How do we finish our sales process and our deal pipeline in HubSpot with a way that allows us to even self-identify why we're losing the deal and when we lost the deal? And that's where all this work stemmed from. And we learned a ton in the process of just building that out in their systems.
That's interesting. I think, like you said, a lot of people, I mean, even us included, we have a system to go back and retro on why we lose deals. So there's basically two buckets of where close loss deals go. Now, there's a million places they go, but there's kind of two places that you identified that they go that are the majority of these things. And so unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So step one of this journey was trying to make the flow chart of what would happen for a close loss deal to be won. So preface here is, to your point, close loss deals go a million directions as to why they don't win. And so this is an oversimplified, imperfect tool, but we ended up for their team realizing people don't buy from us for two reasons. They're either buying from someone else or finding a solution that's a substitute to ours and they're taking action, or they're not doing anything at all. They went with inaction, whether they intentionally meant to do it or didn't intentionally mean to go with inaction. And that's where we started the ultimate flow chart with this team.
Indecision's a big one. The majority of businesses today face indecision. So before we go into that one, because it's such a big topic, let's talk about the competitors, just going with a different vendor provider. How did you help someone address that? Like, what do you do? So, all right, we get it, right? People are going with somebody else other than us. What's step one?
Yeah. So again, to bring this back to the team I was talking to, they were a benefits company and nobody needed their product or their offering. They were in a situation where people didn't know they had a problem. And so they were peddling a solution to something that they weren't sure if it would make sense to add to their benefits plan. And they also had 3 other companies in the space that if you looked at their websites, you would not be able to tell the difference of who would do what and what makes sense for me to do.
That's pretty common for any space though, which is, yeah.
And that's where these folks were kind of left. I think the typical sales process of this was, hey, someone turned me on to this being a good addition to my benefits for my employees or my future employees. I'm going to schedule 3 demo calls with the 3 big dogs in the space. And then I'm going to figure out who I'm going to go with after these 3 demo calls. And that was as educated as someone would be before they would come and sign up to have a 60-minute demo call with this company. And I challenged them a lot to be able to articulate to themselves and their future buyers on their demo calls something along the lines of, hey, if you're talking to us right now, you're likely talking to big dog B and big dog C. And we know the real differences between these things. You should go talk to them. And I also want to help you see how we contrast from these folks. And man, if there's one thing I realized is that at that moment, they didn't feel really confident in what their value proposition actually was. Because when we dug into it, they weren't able to even just articulate to me how they knew whether they should be winning or losing, or what the real differentiation was between the other 2 dogs in their space. And that led to a great conversation of what is our value proposition compared to their value proposition? And how would we articulate that to a buyer if they straight up asked us that question in a way that didn't make us sound like we were just totally salesy or had the same thing everyone says, like white glove customer service and amazing
where our
follow-up
people are the
or
best.
onboarding.
Well, so there's a few things in there that I want to pull out. One is you identified that the space is becoming commoditized, which regardless of what you sell, unless you're selling popsicle stick, that's a dangerous place to be if you're in a service-based business. People are comparing vendors. The lowest price bidder, it becomes a very compelling option for buyers. So it's just a very hard place to be. And then you just said we couldn't articulate our value prop. But more what I heard is, well, we just don't know who's a good fit to buy from us.
Exactly.
Regardless of value prop, they can essentially all have the same value, but it's like, who's best to do this with us compared to them? I think it's saying the same thing, but it's looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. And when people don't know who's a good fit, the first thing they start doing is just pitching. They're like, well, here's how we're different.
Like recoil, right? You just got to fill the space. You just start talking.
Yeah. And they can tell that you're sweating bullets, and you usually go on an absolute train ride of words that mean almost nothing and are gaining almost zero trust. And so I would say your best case scenario is, if you're in this position, just try and shut up and ask a question. But for them, they wanted to at least be able to have the if-then statements that would say, okay, if we want to be the owners of this space, we have to be able to say if-then statements of when it does make sense for folks to go with us versus when it doesn't make sense for folks to go with us. And this, for them, it led into at least practicing verbiage of how we could niche down more than we do, or how we lean into when we are a good fit in certain industries or for certain solutions, or if certain things are true about your company that other folks wouldn't be able to say so specifically on their demo calls, having ultimately the same conversation in the eyes of the buyer.
It's interesting you talk about niching down. So that's a phenomenal strategy because buyers resonate with that. But businesses are pretty apprehensive to do those types of things because when they do that, they have this fear that we're going to turn off another set of buyers, that someone might be getting ready to buy with us. And then all of a sudden we come out and say, well, we're the product for this type of person or thing. And now that person, oh, well, they must not be for me. And they're going to walk. So how did you guide them through that?
Yeah. So here's what we were trying to learn through this process. It was them being able to practice when their value proposition or why we're a good fit sentence did not land with someone in the way that they thought it would. They would take that and bring that back to sharing that snippet of the call recording with the marketing department and saying, yeah, what can we do differently with our verbiage on our website that allows these things to be covered before I'm sitting on a demo call, having someone fire in like verbal gunshots at me, trying to figure out me doing hip fired answers to things that if we would have say them or show them better, it wouldn't be something that was getting discussed this far down somebody's buyer's experience through this process.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of the role playing aspect. We need to have language like this ready to go. And we need to be experts at saying those words in that order so that when people not only are convicted in what we're saying, but when they hear it, they know it lands. It gets said in a way that's so clear and that they receive it. And that there's an art to that. There's just a science to it and also an art. So, all right, niching down, they 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 work with the marketing team on this. Is there anything else around that aspect of losing to competitors that was extra effective?
You know, so it was a lot of role playing with their sales team on demo calls. And then the second thing that they wanted after this was the salespeople were like, why can't we get this on a piece of paper that we could be giving to someone as like a tool to help somebody truly understand the differences? In this space, I mean, there was third parties that would show you the table of like the variables and then the boxes that each of the three systems had. And they're like, why don't we get to own that level of the conversation ourselves? So the last thing that they made was when someone would bring up another competitor, or when the salesperson would actually bring up, you're likely looking at these other options. Here's the best tool you can look at to truly understand the differences of three companies that are going to look and feel really similar in these three demo calls. It did make a difference with folks, just for them to be able to say, wow, it's really interesting. You guys are taking a stance of being able to talk about everyone in this way. And I appreciate you making it a little bit easier for me to buy something that is kind of challenging to understand the differences.
Well, that's really drawing the line between a sales process and a buying process. And it's like, which one are you designing your system for? Like, a lot of businesses will say, our sales process is created so that it works for us. Here are the stages someone goes through for us to move them forward to buy from us. And then there's the lens that you're talking about with this company, is that they said, well, what are the things that the buyers need to know and understand? What are the decisions they need to make to feel comfortable to move forward with us over somebody else? And so, all right, well, we understand that this is a problem, so let's just address it. It's crazy how that works.
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned this other bucket of indecision or inaction, and I think there's a lot of businesses can relate to this one. I mean, even us included. I mean, we're in a space where if you don't buy from us, there's very few people in the world who are going to be able to help you do the thing that we do. And so the majority of people, if you don't buy from us, you don't do anything at all, or you attempt to go it alone. Talk through a little bit about how you address this with this benefits company.
Yeah. This is where the vast majority of their close lost sat after going through this process. It's also where, to your point, like the vast majority of our close lost sits, is people that, whether they meant to do it or not, just ended up not taking action and doing anything. They didn't find a substitute. They didn't even try to DIY it. They were just, this isn't clear enough to me to see the urgency of making this decision right now. And so it's like, let's circle back in 3 months, the kiss of death of any sales conversation.
It's interesting because, especially in a sale like benefits provider like that, there's no DIY. I mean, there might be, but it's nothing compared to like in the world that we live in. When someone's like, all right, I'm going to try and just go it alone, you have someone running point on your marketing and sales strategy, and you try to just pull out all the stops and address all the things and create change inside your organization on your own. But in this respect, it's like, well, the pain wasn't as painful as we thought, right? Like there was not enough there for us to warrant the expense. And so how does a salesperson in this situation address something like that?
Yeah. So the way you just said it is definitely the way people feel it, and never the way people say it. Here's how the end of their sales conversations would go every time. It's somebody that's sitting on a demo call, learning about the offering, and that person is clearly not the person that's going to sign the agreement at the end of it. They're so overtly the information gatherer. And there's a bunch of head nods at the end. They're like, thanks so much for this. This was really cool. I'm going to bring this back to my team and we're going to discuss it, and I'll follow up with you via email. And then the salesperson quickly trying to make clearer next steps, being, should we circle back in 2 weeks? Let's just get time on the book so we don't have to go back and forth via email, blah, blah, blah. It just fizzled out to 90% of the time, this person would leave that call and ghost forever. And then it was the game of the salesperson trying not to feel needy, doing email follow-ups, saying, I thought of you when I read this article. all of the classic ways of, please just let me get back on your radar and get back on a call with me.
I saw you're still alive and I was wondering if you wanted to buy from me.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've never met a good salesperson that's good at like validating someone that's ghosted them for 3 emails. So as soon as you're there, I know you've
It's
done this to 100 people. Like you're like, it almost makes you cringe to see that name come up in your inbox
here
again
we
and be like,
go.
I couldn't show my face to that person again if you paid me $100.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. Now, even if I wanted to come back, now I have to explain where I've been, like why I'm not responding to you. It's just, or just give you the corporate motion of, yeah, other things became a priority or something. Anyway, so
Exactly.
there's like another thing in here. So it's not just so much indecision. It sounds like there's an element of this making sure sales has gained the proper commitments or the proper things to move that deal forward. So
Hmm.
like in this example, what I heard is these deals reached a stage in the sales process that it wasn't actually in. The salesperson might have said, all right, this is a stage 3 op. And in reality, it's still stage 1 because we don't have a decision maker involved. And
Yeah.
so when they're pushing deals forward and they're getting to a place here that they're all fizzling out because of indecision, they're doing nothing or they're ghosting them. It's well, we didn't accurately we didn't gain all the correct things in order to actually get to put the deal where we said it was. Like it didn't actually
Right.
make as much progress as we thought.
Yeah. So there were a couple things this team learned in the process of this. They realized that they were measuring the wrong performance metric and pushing for the wrong thing. Their team was measuring how many demo calls can we deliver in the
The
next quarter.
classic.
Yeah. It was this like top of the sales funnel like thing that they were. It wasn't about who was on the call. It wasn't about if they were ready for the information. It was just the act of getting as many of those demo calls done as possible. And it was like the ultimate detriment to why deals were never going to get across the finish line. So rule number one we did was our ultimate goal is not to have an information gatherer demo call. In fact, it's probably the reason why we won't close these deals. Truth number two that we all had to commit to is it's likely that 90% of the information gatherers that we are talking to on our demo calls are extremely shitty communicators and don't have much say in their company. And it sounds obvious when you say that, but like, here's what ends up really happening when the decision maker gathers information. Someone sent them off to do this. And they said, yep, bring us back the information that will allow us to know if this is something we should look into further. And then that information gatherer is horrible at playing the game of telephone with all of this information. They also are worried about like an idiot themselves. So they're like, I don't like tell my company to do the wrong thing. And they are like not equipped to go have the meeting that has to happen, lead the discussion that has to take place. Instead, they're just, here's the differences I saw in the organization. This is the pamphlet that they sent to me after. You let me know what you want to do with it. And again, 90% of the time, this is the leadership team going, doesn't seem that important to me. I don't feel any of the pain. And none of this information from this information gatherer is making me feel any pain at all. And so something we practiced with this team was you got to get an agreement from the information gatherer at the end of this is, do you agree this is something that your company should be taking seriously right now? Yes or no? And if it's a no, it's not a big deal, but this isn't something for a team that doesn't feel this pain at all. Usually they could get that agreement. And then the salesperson would go, great, I'm glad you say that. You likely are up against a massive task. It's trying to get 5 people to understand the information that you just took in here. And it's going to feel like a big game of telephone. And you're probably not feeling super equipped to go look like a hero doing that right now, which is why me, the salesperson, I'm going to get in the boat with you. I'm as much in this responsibility as you are to go pass this information off the right way to you. And secretly, this salesperson doesn't want this information gatherer to mess up the app that they have, which is when this team and we ended up making this type of content called decision maker assignment selling content. It's, as we know, assignment selling content is just assigning learning materials that allows education to have happen. And for this one specifically, it was, what is the physical email we want this information gatherer to be able to forward on to the people that need to sign off on this being a smart move, and educates them, facilitates the conversation that has to happen, makes them think of the questions and considerations they should think of before signing the thing, and then gives them a timeline on actually signing the thing. So we did everything we could to not let the information gatherer become the reason that this deal didn't get moved through by trying to retain as much control as we could of what the sales process would look like internally within these companies when we wouldn't get to be in like the physical rooms where these conversations were taking place.
There's a principle in category design that talks a lot about this idea of languaging. And if you are capable of framing and naming the problem, this language makes its way into the mouths of the people who are going to buy it, right? And so it allows them to clearly articulate the thing to the people who can spend the money on it. So it kind of sounds like you guys took a bit of this principle, said, how are we going to empower these champions to do this thing? Especially as you said, like, it's a really, the space is becoming more and more commoditized. The differences between us are very minimal, if any. So now they have this communication barrier where they're not able to explain to their VP or whoever needs to sign off on this why we would pick option A over option B. And then they say, well, if we're going to do this, go with the lowest cost option because there's clearly no difference, right? And then things start to spiral out of control. So it's being able to address this as one, empowering the champions, like make the recommendation, makes it easy. If the other organizations aren't doing that, your champion or your information gatherer is more likely to pick you over them because you said it, right? You get in the boat with them and you help them make the case because they want to solve this problem or they have a vested interest in doing this. And so that allows them to articulate, right, the problem more clearly to the person who can spend the money on it.
Exactly.
So how'd this pan out?
So they ended up making some really great content that was broken down by stakeholders in the company. They needed management to sign off, they needed IT to sign off, and they needed finance to sign off. And they ended up having far less demo calls, but moving demo calls from 25% conversion rates closer to 45% conversion rate, because two things: they handle demo calls way differently. And then they gate kept demo calls more than they had in the past. It wasn't the one thing that was all over their website. And they would do pre-rec calls before those demo calls, called discovery calls in their words, that allowed them to set the conditions for what a demo call would look with their team, so that they didn't keep going through this absolute failing internal sales process.
Yeah, I think there's a feeling in when you sell SaaS, or this is mindset in SaaS in general, that if you can just get them to see the tool, and if you can really guide that experience, that they will see the value, you can command a premium price, and all these things start to fall in place. But that's looking at it from the perspective of the business and what serves the sellers and what serves the business. Whereas, like, I've bought a bunch of SaaS tools over the years, and every single time they gatekeep a demo, or they really hang this demo up as it's going to be this mind-blowing experience, one, it's just never what you need it to be. Even no matter how quote-unquote customized it is, they slap your name in the demo portal or something.
Right.
But it never quite does any of those things, and it never demonstrates the value. It never helps you understand why they believe they're worth the premium price and all the other things, especially. SaaS is just becoming more and more commoditized every single day. There's so few vendors who have something truly differentiated that makes you feel like, oh, this is starting to add up to me. So I think as a buyer, they plus slam dunk on supporting buyers, because buyers don't care for the demo as much as they care for, like, all right, help me understand help me mind map this. So many things, and especially the more and more commoditized you get, the harder it gets to map that as a buyer.
Right.
And
who are you going to
frustration creeps in, and then boom, you're like, screw this.
Exactly. Because I challenge, you're dead on in the sense of every SaaS company thinks if we could just get them on a demo call, then our salespeople are going to wow them. Our product is going to wow them. And first question I ask them is, how do you make the equivalent of the value that's happening on your demo calls today happen on a video on your website? And they hated that challenge. The last thing they wanted was to put this free 15-minute video that would do like 90% of the value that a demo call was providing today, just being smack dab right on their website. And to your point about the frustration, imagine being that buyer sitting through 3 demo calls, seeing your logo in the upper left-hand corner, seeing the features and benefits, getting followed up with in the same way. Like, you're not going to know who to trust between those three people. They're going to feel like three of the exact same people. And so one of the biggest things you just got to do is be different than the other people that are selling your thing. Because at least then they can contrast you from how they're categorizing the other folks in their head. Like, a big part of this is like, people don't buy because they don't trust you, or at least don't trust you to help them make a decision. And if you're not different in your sales process than the other people they're talking to in a commoditized based space, they're not going to know whether to ask it to you or of another company. And then they're going to ask it to nobody. And this deal is going to go nowhere.
Yeah, I call this closing the trust gap. And I use the analogy that moving the boat closer to the dock. So even before the demo call or that hand raiser moment where someone gets in touch with sales, there's that moment where if you're on the boat, you're making the leap to the dock. And if the boat's not close enough, you're just not going to do it. There's almost no hesitation, no consideration. It might be worth it. No, you're just not going to do it. There's so many easier things to do than take the risk of wasting my time, wasting all this energy, potentially wasting money, getting to the point where I bring in a decision maker and then it ends up being a waste of their time. And that makes me look bad. There's so many potential negative outcomes than just taking no action at all. And so when I say closing the trust gap, right, it's like, what are the little things you can do that are dozens to hundreds of touch points that just slowly but surely move the boat closer to the dock, closing the trust gap? And you build trust in these little ways, right? You're like, all right, well, and we look around at the landscape and we say, are the people in our space hiding this information from buyers? Okay, well, that serves them. So let's serve the buyer. Let's put a 15-minute ungated demo on our website and let people click around the software. Let someone see how this works. All right, boom, a little bit closer. We've eliminated a doubt about us. And we do it again every single time they have an interaction with us. Let's explain, and I'm sure they've done this too. It's like, let's explain price. Why are some people super cheap? That's in a commoditized space. That's going to be one of your number one drivers of trust or builders of trust. It's over time. And then boom, you get someone, they make the leap. They're in the sales process. And now we have this moment to close the gap faster because we have one-to-one contact with someone. I think this is a different mindset, which is the gap is not closed because someone reached out to you to talk to sales. The gap is just closed enough for someone to take the leap.
Mm-hmm.
And sales is a one-to-one mechanism to rapidly close the trust gap and actually make some money. And so what you just said, right? They had this super specific niche down assignment selling content that helps address the thing that the person in front of them was exactly trying to do. I need to get my VP on board. I need to be able to articulate the problem. I need to be able to articulate the differences. I need to do this in a super clear way that doesn't waste anybody's time or make me look like an idiot. All this stuff adds up to the point of like, we've built up enough social capital with the person in front of us. We've built up enough trust that like, okay, well, they can make a confident recommendation that we are the ones.
Yeah. It's how do I retain control of my sales process, my buyer's journey as much as possible after they raise their hand and say, I want to learn from you. And how do I make that person look and feel like a hero going through our journey and not feel like an idiot? And
right. Make them feel good about the choice of going with us, not just make them feel like they're going through the motion of like, okay, I got to buy this thing and here we go again type of thing.
That's it.
Yeah. We end every episode about we're different, how to think different. So hit me with how to think different, closed, lost sales ops.
So if I were a business owner and all this felt new to me, the thing I would spend 2 hours on in the next couple of days is look back at the last 50 deals that came through your pipeline, your phone calls, and unpack them into two camps. Did this person go and buy something else? Did they go with a competitor, or did they stick with indecision? And what can I learn to improve my sales process based on how these people died and fell out? And what can I learn about improving my marketing and messaging on my website or my social media based on what we found out at the last rung of our step. You're going to learn a lot by trying to get into the shoes of the last 50 people that did not pull the trigger and buy from you.
Awesome, man. Good stuff. Dude, this was fun. I think we should do it again sometime.
Heck yeah, anytime.
Perhaps next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll go live with Zach.
See you there.
See you there, man.